Okay, let's unpack this. We're taking a deep dive today into some fascinating, disturbing material you've shared with us.
That's right. It's a historical account, really pulls together the facts and details about this figure from Weimar Republic, Berlin, a man named Karl Grossmann.
And our mission here really is to pull out the most compelling bits, the important insights from this material to help you understand who Carl Grossman actually
And the
was.
context, yeah. The context of his crimes. It's an unsettling history.
Definitely. There are some surprising details in here, quite a scale of mystery around him, too.
Absolutely. And some, well, pretty grim facts embedded in the historical record.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Give us the headline facts. Who was Carl Grossman?
Well, the material lays out the basics. Karl Friedrich Wilhelm Grossmann, though, mostly known as Karl.
Right.
Born near Berlin, Alt-Rippen, 1863. He died in 1922, suicide by hanging.
And he picked up some truly chilling nicknames along the way, didn't he?
He did. Things like the Beast of Silesia train station, the Berlin Butcher.
Bluebeard of Berlin, I see here, too.
Exactly. Those names really give you a sense of how he was seen later. But importantly, even before the murders he's famous for, he had prior convictions.
Oh, right. For what?
Assault, rape, even child molestation.
So this wasn't like out of the blue. He had a history.
A serious one. The period for these specific murders we're focusing on is 1918 to 1921.
And that was mainly in the Friedrichshain quarter of Berlin.
Yes, and the estimated number of victims linked to him just in that period is, yeah, well, it's staggering.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
The range given is anywhere from 26 up to possibly over 100. It's a huge uncertain range.
Wow. And he was caught when?
August 21st, 1921. That's when they apprehended him.
Okay, let's rewind a bit then. What about his early life? The sources must say something about his childhood.
They do.
Yeah.
It paints a picture of a pretty difficult start. Born into a large family.
How large?
Initially listed as 7 kids, but later clarified as 2 brothers, 4 sisters. His father, Karl G. Friedrich Grossmann, is described as an alcoholic, ill-tempered, abusive,
Abusive how?
beating his wife, beating the children. And the account says he singled out Karl,
Why Carl specifically?
reportedly because he hated how much Karl looked like him, even made him lie about bruises, just a really harsh environment.
Yeah, sounds awful. And his brother, Franz, he saw early signs of trouble.
He did. His brother apparently corroborated witnessing violent thoughts, even sadistic sexual tastes from a young age.
And there's this particularly unsettling detail about animal slaughter.
Oh, absolutely. The source mentions him at age 6 witnessing a pig slaughter. He'd supposedly pushed his brother aside to get a better look.
And he told his brother something disturbing afterwards.
Yeah, allegedly told him that the sight of blood, well, it aroused him.
Right. And a friend saw something similar with a rabbit.
A childhood friend recalled him having the sort of odd pleasure of watching a rabbit being slaughtered. Very disturbing early signs.
Then there's that nickname, Zicken Carl. Nanny Goat Carl. What was that about?
Yeah, that came from these bizarre interactions with the family goats. Things like smashing their heads, covering himself in salt so they'd lick him.
Just strange and cruel.
Exactly. Another unsettling detail from back then.
And school wasn't really his thing either.
No, not much formal education. Left after just the 3rd grade of Volksschule, which was like primary school.
So pulling back, the insight here seems to be this clear pattern, right? Disturbing behavior, violence, cruelty from a very young age.
Long before he became notorious, yeah. And possibly made worse by that abusive home life.
Okay, so with that difficult background, those early signs, how did things escalate as he got older? When did the criminal life really start?
Well, his first real job and apprenticeship was at a meat shop. He was only 13.
And initially it seemed like a fit because of the knife skills.
Yeah, supposedly good knife skills and no aversion to blood. Looked like he might make a decent slaughterer.
But that didn't last.
No. Dismissed at 16, the reason given, attempting to rape the owner's wife.
Wow. And the owner beat him for it.
Apparently so. He never actually finished any formal training as a slaughterer or butcher after that.
So the violence, the sexual deviance, it's already showing up in his teens in his work life.
Exactly. He left home around then too, apparently threw out for stealing money, went to Berlin.
And the arrests started pretty quickly after that.
The records show it. From age 19, 1882, starting with vagrancy, then it just stacks up.
Rels.
Theft, attempted blackmail, threat, property damage. He was jailed 3 times just for assault between 86 and 88.
And I see here he was even kicked out of the army.
The Imperial German Army, yeah. Discharged because of a criminal arrest for rape. Served a year in prison for that.
And then another assault conviction right after.
Yep. Another year sentence. After getting out, He's working odd jobs in Berlin butcher shops, slaughterhouses, peddling things,
But still getting into trouble.
constantly.
Wow.
Jailed again for begging, fraud, trespassing.
Now, the material mentions this period in the late 1890s, him moving around southern Germany.
Right, living by begging, peddling, more theft. More convictions followed for vagrancy, trespassing, fraud, resisting arrest.
But there's one specific conviction here that really jumps out. It's quite disturbing.
Ah, yes. The bestiality conviction, 1896, in Mannheim.
What were the details?
10 months sentence. He was found in a stable with a nanny goat. The goat had severe swelling, and Grossman himself was described as being wet around the knees.
Just deeply disturbing. And this wasn't the end of his predatory behavior, was it? It escalated to crimes against children in Bavaria.
Tragically, yes. While he was in Bavaria, the crimes included assault, burglary, and specifically sex crimes against young girls.
What kind of charges?
His first charge there was for raping a 4-year-old girl. He got 15 months for molesting a 12-year-old.
Back then, something even worse.
Yes.
Oh.
15-year sentence
Mm-hmm.
for raping another 4-year-old girl.
15 years.
And that little girl died from infection after the attack. It's just horrific.
Unbelievable. And even in prison, he was violent.
Oh, yeah. Racked up 55 citations for bad behavior while incarcerated.
So looking at this whole period, before the Berlin murders, it's just decades of escalating crime.
Absolutely. Sexual violence against adults, animals, children.
Mm-hmm.
Just this persistent, intensifying pattern. It wasn't new when he hit Berlin in the late 1910s.
Right, so he gets out of that long sentence in August 1914. World War I is just starting.
But he's too old to be drafted. So he heads back to Berlin.
And sets himself up near the Ostbahnhof, the train station. What was that area like then?
The source describes it as pretty rough. Lots of crime. Unemployment was high. Prostitution was visible. A tough neighborhood.
But he had money.
Surprisingly, yes. Around 10,000 mark in savings, apparently from his peddling days. He rented a room there.
And he started selling things again.
Yeah.
Meat.
Yeah, selling meat on the black market was common then, with wartime shortages. And he ran a sausage stand, apparently at Andreas Square.
But people noticed him. His neighbors.
Oh, definitely. Notice his appearance, which was described as repulsive, and apparently he had a terrible stench.
And they heard noises.
Yes, loud noises, sometimes screaming coming from his flat, but
he just assumed.
they assumed it was rough sex with prostitutes, which, according to the source, was pretty common in that building area. So it didn't raise immediate alarm bells, tragically.
That kind of mundane assumption hiding something truly horrific.
Exactly. It might have masked what was really going on for a while.
So what was his method, according to the accounts? How did he operate during this 1918-1921 period?
He'd lure women, often near the train station, women looking for work, sometimes locals, sometimes sex workers,
How did he lure them?
offering work, specifically work as a domestic housekeeper in his apartment.
And some understood that was code, others thought it was genuine.
Precisely. Some might have known what it implied, others were genuinely desperate for work and believed him.
And once they were in his apartment.
The accounts describe a couple of scenarios. Sometimes he'd physically overpower and rape them quickly.
And other times.
Other times, he might drug them. Or let them do housekeeping work for days, even weeks, before assaulting them.
So it wasn't always immediate violence?
Not always, and apparently some women were even released if they promised to keep quiet. But others he killed, seemingly at his discretion.
And the bodies, where did they go?
He dumped the remains, mostly in the Luisenstadt Canal and the nearby Engelbecken Basin.
And he had a way to cover his tracks, didn't he? Something involving the police.
Yeah, this was quite calculated. He would report the women, whether they were dead or had survived, and fled to the police.
Report them for what?
As runaways who had stolen from him.
Ah, clever. So it explained their disappearance and discredited them if they ever tried to accuse him later.
Exactly. A really cynical move. And these crimes, they went largely unnoticed at first.
Why was that?
Partly the chaos of the time. Post-war Berlin, lots of political unrest, protests. The Berlin police were often tied up dealing with that.
So the context, the environment, really enable him.
It seems like it played a big role. He exploited that chaos and the vulnerability of women desperate for work or shelter. It's a chilling insight, how the circumstances can help hide such crimes.
It sounds like he got away with this for years. Were there ever moments where he almost got caught? Any near misses?
Several. And they're quite alarming when you read about them. The accounts detail one instance in March 1920.
What happened?
A neighbor, Gertrude Grabowski, heard a child crying from his flat. She reported it.
Okay, so someone investigated?
A social worker went, found a 15-year-old girl there. The social worker suspected digital penetration, basically molestation.
But the police.
Didn't pursue it. The girl was homeless, apparently didn't press charges. And the social worker also had suspicions about women's clothing she saw in his flat, but that was reportedly ignored too.
Wow, a missed chance right there. What else?
Then in October 1920, a woman named Martha Balzer came forward. She was a survivor.
Right. What did she report?
She reported that her friend, Frida Schubert, was missing, and she believed Grossman was involved.
Did anyone back her up?
Yes. The missing friend's fiancé supported her story. The police did search Grossman's place this time.
And
They found some women there, but concluded there was no link to the missing woman. Another dead end.
unbelievable. And then there's an incident even closer to his arrest, early August 1921, something with the landlord's wife.
Yes, Helene Itzig.
Yeah.
She actually discovered a body in his apartment.
She found a victim.
Yes, a homeless woman he'd lured, tried to rape, and then killed.
What did Helene do? Did she call the police?
Not immediately. Grossman lied to her, said something about solicitation, and apparently paid her 50 DM to keep quiet.
Why didn't she report it?
The source suggests part of it was the negative attitude towards sex workers at the time. She maybe didn't want to get involved or believed his story initially. He dismembered the body hours later.
Do we know who that victim was?
She was later identified as Elizabeth Barthel.
And there was another incident right before his arrest in August 21, an assault charge.
Yes, he got into a fight with a man whose sister, Johanna Sosnowski, was missing. Grossman was charged with assault over the fight.
And he later confessed to killing her.
He did. But at the time, that specific allegation, the link to her disappearance, wasn't investigated.
It's just one failure after another. And what about other women who might have reported him for rape?
The material indicates there were other reports, women like Emma B., Frida T., but their reports were often disregarded,
Why?
largely because of Grossman's counterclaims that they had stolen from him. And their status, often as prostitutes, meant police didn't always take their accusations seriously.
So these repeated failures, these dismissals, especially of women seen as less credible.
It really highlights the potential systemic blind spots, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The prejudices that tragically allowed him to keep going.
The discovery of the dismembered remains must have been what really brought public attention to this, though.
Oh, absolutely. That really changed things. From around May 1921 onwards, body parts started showing up frequently in the Spree River, especially in the Lucenstadt Canal section.
How frequently?
Sometimes daily, according to the account, to cause huge public alarm, understandably.
And based just on those remains, how many victims did they think there were?
Well, they could connect body parts to at least 23 different women.
23.
But the sheer volume of remains led some investigators to suspect much higher numbers, maybe up to 100 or even more.
But estimating was difficult.
Very. The source notes something complicating it. The cap putsch.
Right, that failed coup attempt around that time. How did that affect things?
Well, apparently bodies of some Reichswehr officers killed during the putsch had also been dumped in the Spree.
So you had body parts from different sources potentially mixing in the water.
Exactly, making the task of sorting and identifying the murder victims even harder. They didn't examine all body parts further because of this confusion.
Did they try to get public help?
Yes, a 5,000 mark reward was offered for information leading to the killer. Newspapers ran appeals. It led to a few possible identifications, but nothing concrete was confirmed from those appeals.
And this is where that really infamous rumor comes in, isn't it? The Braut auf der Stille.
Ah, yes. The idea that he was selling the meat of his victims at his sausage stand or on the black market.
What does the source material say about that? Is it true?
No. The material is quite clear. Police at the time, and later historians looking back, dismissed this as completely unfounded.
So just tabloid sensationalism.
Pretty much, likely invented to sell newspapers. It's a lurid detail that stuck, but the evidence wasn't there, according to these accounts.
So the remains brought the horror out, but also confusion and these wild rumors.
Right. It shows the scale of the unknown, but also how the media latched onto it, shaping public perception, sometimes inaccurately.
Okay, so after all these near misses, the body parts turning up, the public alarm, how did they finally catch him? What was the actual moment?
It really came down to vigilant neighbors in the end. On the night of August 21st, 1921,
Who did they notice?
a neighbor, Robert Iglitsky, and his wife heard screams, loud banging noises coming from Grossman's flat late at night.
More noises, but this time they acted.
Yes. After the noises stopped, there was a silence that felt alarming to them. So the neighbor called the police.
And led them there.
Yes, led the officers right to Grossman's apartment door. Grossman refused to open up.
So the police forced their way in.
They did, burst the door open.
Yeah.
And the scene inside.
What did they find?
Officer Klain saw Grossman immediately trying to commit suicide, drinking something, muckafuck coffee laced with cyanide.
And Clam stopped him.
Managed to stop him just in time. Another officer, Angusser, handcuffed Grossman.
And then they saw?
Right away, Officer Klain saw her, a body of a nude female on the bed.
Dead.
She was still alive, barely, but died just seconds later, right there in front of them.
Oh my God. That timing is just chillin'.
It truly is, a matter of seconds.
Did they identify her?
Yes, she was identified as Marie Nietzsche, a sex worker who had actually just been released from jail that very day.
And witnesses had seen her with Grossman?
Confirmed. Seen with him earlier that evening.
What happened next? Did word get out?
Spread like wildfire. Hundreds of people gathered outside the building. It got ugly.
People wanted to get at him.
Yes, some were armed. Police had to actually protect Grossman from the crowd as they took him away.
Where did they take him?
To the police station at Alexanderplatz. Charged him with murder right away. Newspapers jumped on it, initially linking him to 6 murders, then 5, naming women who were missing.
So his capture, in the end, it wasn't really from the main investigation following the remains?
No, it was almost accidental.
Yeah.
Driven by that specific neighbor's concern about the noise that night, it highlights how localized the final break was, despite everything else.
So after the arrest, what did the deeper investigation reveal about his methods, the number of victims, survivors?
Well, they confirmed his primary methods of murder, usually asphyxiation,
Oh.
often by literally shoving his hand down the victim's throat into their mouth, or sometimes blunt force trauma, usually while the victim was tied to the bed.
And neighbors started talking more then about the women they'd seen.
Yes. They reported seeing this steady stream of women, mostly young, clearly destitute, going into his apartment over the years.
How many did they estimate they'd seen?
One estimate mentioned in the source is around 150 different women seen entering his building with him.
150. But only Marie Nietzsche's body was actually found in the apartment when he was caught.
That's right. Just her. But there were bloodstains. Significant ones. They indicated at least 2 other people had been butchered in that room just in the recent weeks leading up to his arrest.
And what about survivors? Did they estimate how many women might have encountered him and gotten away?
Investigators came up with an estimate of around 50 women and teenage girls who had been in his apartment but had survived the encounter somehow.
50 survivors. That's actually surprisingly high.
It is, and their experiences varied a lot, according to the accounts.
How so?
While some were definitely raped, others apparently just did housekeeping work for him. Some might have engaged in consensual sex, maybe for money or a place to stay.
Did they say how he acted initially?
Many noted he'd often start by offering food, coffee, maybe a little money, trying to seem helpful at first.
Were people in the area wary of him? Other sex workers, for instance?
Yes, apparently so. They reportedly nicknamed him Mysterious Carl, knew something was off about him, warned newcomers to stay away, weren't sure what his intentions were.
And did any survivors describe being tied up or tortured?
Some did, yes. And their descriptions matched the kinds of wounds found on some of the dismembered bodies discovered earlier.
But not all encounters were violent.
Apparently not. The source mentions one of the earliest identified survivors, Marie Fels, from way back in January 1918.
What happened with her?
She reportedly wasn't assaulted at all, just shared a beer with him. He gave her some new shoes, and she left.
So the picture is complicated, not uniformly lethal.
Exactly. The high number of survivors, the range of experiences, shows his methods weren't always the same. And it definitely makes it harder to know the full picture. Many victims were likely never reported, never identified.
Now, the material also touches on this really bizarre rumor, connecting him to a famous historical figure.
Ah, yes. You see this pop up in some true crime accounts. Colin Wilson, for instance, noted a rumor that one of Grossman's victims, maybe from 1920, was possibly Grand Duchess Anastasia Nikolaevna of Russia.
The Tsar's daughter, who people thought might have survived the revolution.
Exactly. That whole mystery was huge at the time. So the rumor attached itself to this case somehow.
But the source material you shared, it gives important context on that, right? It sort of debunks it.
Crucially, yes. It presents the counterclaim. Apparently, a family later said the victim in question was their daughter, who had run away and was pretending to be Anastasia, masquerading as an imposter.
And they reference Anna Anderson, the famous Anastasia claimant.
They do. But the source quickly points out that Anna Anderson herself, whose real name was later found to be Franziska Chanskowski, was actually documented as being in a Berlin mental asylum during the time of Grossman's killings.
Ah, so she couldn't have been a victim.
Right. And she died much later, of natural causes.
So that whole Anastasia connection seems to be just, well, a weird historical footnote.
More about the obsession with the Anastasia mystery at the time than anything factual about Grossman's victims?
Exactly. It's presented in the material mostly as an example of the kind of speculation that surrounded the case.
Okay, so after the arrest, what was Grossman like in jail? Did he talk? Did he cooperate?
Initially, no. Very resistant. But then a psychologist, a Dr. Vernenberg, found an unusual way to gain his trust.
How?
Through Grossman's pet bird, a siskin named Henschen.
His bird. Serious.
Apparently so. The bird had mites. Vernenberg treated the bird and allowed Grossman private time with it, and this seemed to work.
So he started talking.
He did, gained some trust, and Grossman confessed, initially to killing the 3 women.
Which ones?
Marie Nitsch, the woman found in his apartment, someone he called Martha, and Johanna Sosnowski, the sister of the man he'd fought with.
Did he say why he killed them? He denied theft as a motive. Yes, denied theft. Reportedly said it was because, quote, I can't control myself around a girl. Just pure impulse.
And he described the whole process.
Luring, rape, kill, dismember, dump. Laid it out. But then he clammed up again.
Why?
Reportedly refused more questions unless Hensch's treatment continued. Using the bird as leverage, maybe.
Wow. And he asked for a specific lawyer, someone known.
Yes, Eric Fry, who
Yeah.
had defended another serial killer. And apparently, Grossman's very first request to Frey wasn't about his case.
What was it?
It was for Frey to take possession of his bird, Henschen.
Unbelievable. Did he confess to more killings later?
Yes, later on, he also confessed to killing Frieda Schubert.
What?
They found her purse on his property. And another woman, Albertine Ash.
But then he changed his story again.
Completely backtracked, started claiming the deaths were accidents, maybe angry outbursts, or happened for trivial reasons.
Like what?
Like a woman refused sex or didn't disclose she had another partner, things like that. And he started trying to claim criminal insanity.
To avoid the death penalty.
Presumably. He even wrote this formal complaint from jail, claimed the victims had consented to sex, that the deaths were accidents, bizarrely claiming he was just caressing their tongues.
Caressing their tongues, that sounds like a euphemism for strangulation or suffocation.
Exactly. And he claimed the survivor testimonies were exaggerated lies, that they were ungrateful for his hospitality, just total denial and victim blaming.
And his violent side didn't disappear in jail either.
No, not at all. He reportedly attacked a guard, tried to strangle him, had to be chained up during meetings with his lawyer after that.
And he started writing an autobiography.
By June 1922, yeah. And the tone was apparently chilling, claiming his victims were surplus women, calling them economic and social pests.
So these shifting confessions, the blame shifting, the attempted manipulation.
It really paints a picture of someone completely without remorse, desperately trying to control the narrative and avoid responsibility, right up to the end. A stark contrast to those initial, maybe tactical confessions.
How was he being portrayed in the media during all this? What labels were they using?
Well, you saw things like German Jack the Ripper. Bluebeard was another one, especially in the English language press.
Any others?
German Landru was used too, after the French serial killer Henri Landru. Though the source notes their methods, their MO, wasn't actually very similar.
So the labels were more about finding a familiar archetype for the horror.
Seems like it. Trying to categorize him based on known figures, even if the fit wasn't perfect.
And the media also got things wrong about the victims.
Yes, the material points out a common misrepresentation, portraying all his victims as being exclusively prostitutes, which wasn't the case.
Right, he preyed on job seekers, other vulnerable women too.
Exactly. So the media labels tell us something about how the press framed it, maybe simplified it, and unfortunately relied on those victim stereotypes.
Did they look into his family background at all? From a medical or psychological perspective, try to find any clues there?
Yes, there was a medical assessment done. It reviewed his family history, his father's previous wives, their children, any prior arrests in the family.
Did they find anything significant?
They noted some other issues in the family tree. A brother described as having cerebral softening. A half-brother who was also a rapist, serving 2 long sentences.
Any other relatives?
Yeah, a niece and nephew who reportedly had issues like screaming fits or recurrent fits of rage.
So a pattern of mental health issues or criminal behavior in the extended family, did they connect that directly to Carl's actions?
The material mentions this history was documented in the assessment, but it also states it wasn't clear if there was a direct connection to Carl's specific behavior.
So they presented it factually, but didn't draw a firm causal link.
Exactly. It highlights the complexity, right?
Yeah.
You can document a troubled family history, but saying that caused this specific pattern of serial killing. The source material presents it as documented information, not a definitive explanation.
Okay, so that brings us to the trial itself and how it all ended.
Right. The trial finally began on July 3, 1922, at the Moabit Criminal Court in Berlin.
Who testified?
A range of people. Neighbors, former colleagues,
Yeah.
and significantly, over a dozen survivors were chosen to testify against him.
That must have been incredibly intense in the courtroom.
Oh, the descriptions make it sound like it. Highly charged atmosphere. One witness apparently threw their keys at Grossman, almost hitting his lawyer.
Wow. Any other incidents?
A survivor reportedly lunged at him when he called the witnesses liars. Others just broke down crying on the stand. You can only imagine.
And Grossman himself, how did he react during the trial?
He just doubled down. Retracted any confessions he'd made, kept repeating his claims that the victims had actually stolen from him.
And called the survivors liars.
Called their testimony pure lies, said they were ungrateful to his hospitality, just complete denial and defiance.
But the trial didn't last long. It ended very abruptly.
Very abruptly, only lasted 3 days. On the morning of the third day, July 5, 1922, Grossman was found dead in his cell.
He'd hanged himself.
That's right, used a bedsheet, tied it to a loose nail in the doorframe of his cell.
So, no verdict, no conclusion to the trial.
None. The judge, Walter Boomerd, had to announce Grossman's death in court.
What did the judge say?
He stated that Grossman had ended his own life, had shown absolutely no remorse, and had basically turned himself over to a higher judge. He also noted Grossman had spared the jury a difficult decision.
And the proceedings were just closed.
That was it. Case closed. They did make a death mask of him afterwards,
That's gone now.
presumed destroyed during the bombing of Berlin in World War II.
So his suicide, it denied everyone a proper conclusion.
Exactly. Denied the victims, the survivors, the public, that final judicial process and verdict. It just adds another layer of this sort of unresolved grimness to the whole story. And his defiance right up until that final act really underscores the kind of character depicted in the accounts.
So wrapping this up, reflecting on this deep dive into the material on Carl Grossman, what are the main takeaways? We've traced this journey, haven't we, from that really difficult childhood, the abuse, those disturbing early signs.
Right, through decades of escalating crime across different places. Theft, assault, rape, bestiality, child molestation. Leading up to that incredibly dark period in Berlin near the Ostbahnhof between 1918 and 1921.
We've looked at the potential scale of his crimes there, dozens, maybe over 100 victims, the shocking number of near misses, the missed opportunities by authorities.
Yeah, the system failing to connect the dots or perhaps ignoring credible reports from vulnerable women. And then that abrupt end his suicide mid-trial, leaving so many questions unanswered, especially about the true number of victims.
And I think what this deep dive really reveals, based on these sources, is just how horrific acts can hide behind such a mundane facade, a sausage seller, peddler.
Absolutely. And it hints strongly at how the specific context of Weimar Berlin, the chaos, the poverty, the social upheaval might have played a role. It created vulnerabilities he could exploit.
It highlights the grim reality for those women, the victims and the survivors, and also those potential blind spots in the system at the time. And just that frustrating lack of a definitive resolution. We still don't know how many women he killed.
It's a really stark, unsettling look at the depths of human depravity and maybe how certain societal conditions can, tragically, enable it to flourish hidden in plain sight.
Okay, so here's a final thought, something for you, our listener, to consider based on everything we've unpacked today. Given Carl Grossman's incredibly long history of violence, his sexual crimes, those prior convictions stretching back decades, was his eventual escalation to serial murder in Weimar Berlin almost inevitable? Or were there specific failures in the justice system, maybe societal prejudices that truly allowed him to operate? How much did the unique chaos and circumstances of that particular time and place really enable his hidden crimes to go unchecked for so long?